Hello and welcome to a Blood and Pigment hobby video. I'm Joseph and today I'm working on the Stone Tower Fort from Firelock Games. I'm going to paint it up tonight, share some stone painting techniques. I'm no expert, but this is my second one I've painted here. The first one I painted, I did generic gray with a dry brush and a wash. I'm going to be a tiny bit more fancy on this one, make it look a little more interesting, and I wanted to share that. So I just primed it with, I'm going to use all Citadel products today. I primed it with the spray Mechanicus Standard Gray, which is a little blue out of the spray can, so I'm not entirely happy with it, but I think it'll come out fine. And then we're going to go through 4 different steps, and I've prepped this model, which is a beautiful model, by the way. If you haven't seen it, it's well worth picking up. It's giant, it's really well detailed, really well sculpted, and it's hollow, so it's nice and light. Highly recommended, fun for gameplay, strong, and nice piece. So I got it primed here. First we're going to pick out some individual stones with some base colors other than our primer, although we'll use a primer for the base for most of it. Then we're going to do some dry brushes, and then we'll do some washes, and then do some weathering. And each side will do a different step, as I've prepped each side to do something different. So first, we're going to pick out some stones with a couple alternate colors. It's all this blue-gray right now. I'm going to use 2 very different colors, and these are the layer paints. So they're not quite as thick, not as much pigment. They have a little bit of transparency, which I kind of want to help blend this all together when it's done. I'm using Skavenblight Dinge and Tallarn Sand. Let's start with the gray. So doesn't have to be perfect or very careful because the dry brush will tie it all together, but I'm just going to pick out some rocks to be darker than the main gray color. Rocks aren't all the same color, and they don't all weather the same, and it looks kind of boring and fake to have them all exactly the same color. Like I said, this doesn't have to be precision painting. Try to get some random pieces, no pattern, but a nice spread. Maybe it's one of the big ones here. I like fortifications in Blood and Plunder. It's kind of one of my things that I've been exploring quite a bit. And this is the first one that Firelock really put out, and it is a beast. It cost 20 points in game, which is considerable, but I think it's well worth it. Every time I've seen it played, it has been strong, quite difficult to take. It's tall, so you can't just climb it without special climbing equipment, which you have to pay for. And it's very tough. It has a fortitude of 6. So cannons have to get pretty close to actually start damaging it. I have never seen this fort take more than 2 damage to its structure. At more than 12 inches, you'd only be hitting on 9 for your range, and then, no, 3 for your range, and then you have to hit on 9s for your damage dice. Tougher than, harder to put damage on than any ship, really. And then if you want to storm through this door here, you have to breach it. It's fortified, so you have to do a dedicated action to bust down the door for a charge, and the target number is 4 plus fortitude. So if you don't put any damage on it, you have to get a 10 to bust through here, and that means the best you can do is a 8 if you do a dedicated action with 3 actions, or if you could do a 7 if you get super fancy with strict or great warrior or something. But the point is, it's very hard to charge into this thing. And if you want to just shoot at the guys in it, the lower level gives a special superior cover rule where everything saves on a flat 3 or more, so 80% chance of saving. Only 4 people can shoot out of it, the lower level, at a time, but it's still pretty effective to put 8 guys down there and half fire, 1 reload every turn. Now this brown color is going to stick out kind of like a sore thumb to start with, so I want to be a little careful where I put it, but it won't be nearly as obnoxious once we're done, hopefully. This is Tallarn Sand. Let's do a big one here. Firelock produced a special custom scenario for this Tower for Ambush. Quite an interesting scenario, but difficult for the attacker. It's very fun. It's free in the download section on their website. I recommend you check it out if you're interested. It's an amphibious game where the defender starts in the fort or within a few inches of the fort, but it's nighttime and they're caught unawares. So you have these sentries. You have to try to sneak around and kill the sentries, get close up before they detect you. Should we be brave and do one of these big ones? I don't know if I'm that brave. We'll call that good. Okay, so we got... let's do one more variation here. Let's take the original Mechanicus Standard Grey, although I'm convinced the spray is slightly different than the pot. This is Dying Pot. And we're going to mix it in with some darker tone, just to make sure it gets some of the... it blends well with its... just to kind of tie it together, blend it with its base coat. So I got a little bit of black in with this to make some dark stones. It's getting pretty busy. And I gotta paint this door. I might make a wooden door to put in there. I'm not particularly a big fan of this. It looks like just a gaping door that's open, which is fine. I might just paint it black, make it look open. But it'd be cool if it had a wood texture on it. I might do that later, not here. Alright, so there we have some variation in our stone. Make it look a little real. Here's the next step. We're going to do some dry brushes over the top of that. It's going to make it look more weathered, and it's going to kind of tie these colors together so they don't look so obnoxious. And I'm going to use some non-intuitive colors here. I'm going to use first Tyrant Skull, which is actually a light tan, and then over the top of that some Longboard Grey, and then maybe even a little white over the top of that. use big brush for this. A lot of dry brushing to do. I'm going to use the Citadel's dry paint. You don't have to. I just happen to have it. And it saves a little time. Is this the paint I used before? Doesn't appear to be. That's not what I used before. So it wasn't Tyrant Skull. That one's dead. I didn't use it. What did I use? I know I used Longboard Grey. I was all prepped here. Well, let's use Terminata Stone. It's a little bit lighter, but that must have been what I... Yep, definitely, that's what I used. It's all punched. So I like to use just a piece of cardboard to brush off the first coat of brush worth. And then I'm just going to work this all over. It's going to look a little scary and bright for now. And I'm not worried about my direction of the brush so much. Maybe a little bit of a circular motion to get every angle of the rock. And yeah, the first time I did this model, I just did in gray, and that works. I'll show you it when I'm done. But the light brown over the top actually is a little more dramatic and pretty believable. And less boring. Gray over gray over gray with the gray wash is a little tedious. I got about a 1/2 inch brush here. Just a cheap one. I think I got at Hobby Lobby. So the stones we use a different color on are still pretty obvious, but less so as we get them tied together with this tone. I'll paint these windows black too when I'm done with everything else. Don't forget inside wall bits. Inside here. So back to that stone tower fort scenario. Attacker can come by land and sea. They have to have at least a boat or ship or something come from sea. They can also come from land, so kind of a two-pronged attack. Caught unawares, so you got to deal with the sentries. You might be able to get pretty close. Nighttime visibility is limited to 12 inches. So you can get up, if you kill the sentries, you can get up to 12 inches before the defender in the tower can even do anything. So that's a fun little mini game before the game really starts. And then the attacker needs to get in the fort, which which is very difficult. Like I said, it takes a 10 to charge in. And you can now buy climbing equipment to climb all the way up top here. This is a pretty good 5-6 inches. Alright, let's go to the light tan. And I'm going to be messy and just wipe some paint off here, then go straight to my light gray, Longboard Grey, because I don't want to get this wet. If you get this wet, you really have to dry and dry and dry and dry and dry it before you can dry brush again, or you just smear, which is no fun. So this is a little brighter and it's a little bit more of a gray tone. The defender can also give the attacker strike points in this scenario for running a unit or two off the board. Go run to get help. Try to keep the fort till help arrives to beat off the attackers. So it's an interesting balance of keeping men on the board to defend and running them off to give the attacker strike points and get help, which doesn't really come in the game, but that's what it represents. I've only seen the attacker win once just because the fort is so tough. And with fortification rules, you can clear everything around the fort up to 8 inches. So there's this whole killing field up to the fort, making it very difficult to approach without getting shot. And then when you get there, you got to get through the gate or the door or climb up. And then if you do make it, you're usually shot to pieces before you get there, making it a tough fight once, and if you do get in there. The only way I've beat it, this fort, is with Forlorn Hope, with veteran Forlorn Hope, with grenades and a local guide, so they were able to move up 12 inches in one activation with quick 2 actions, and then use a command point to throw grenades inside through the windows, which you can do. And then the guys inside don't get any special saves. So that's my advice for storming this thing, but it's still not easy. But it's a fun game, fun scenario. I check it out. I recommend this for gameplay. It's very interesting, makes for a very different game than just sneaking around the woods shooting at each other. Alright, we've taken it from this to that. Looks much more convincing. And these don't look nearly as bright, and the gray doesn't look nearly as blue either. Alright. Got the inside here. Now we're going to flip over to the third side and do some washes. And I'm not going to do anything very fancy here. I'm just going to use mostly... I said I was going to use all Citadel, but I find that the Nuln Oil is a tiny bit darker than I want. So I'm going to use the Vallejo Model Wash Dark Grey. And then use a little bit of Nuln Oil as a darker accent. And then I'm going to throw a couple extra colors in here and there just for some variety. Some Agrax Earthshade. Of course, the 2 best washes. And then even a little bit of green here and there for some growth, moss kind of feel. Alright, here's our... And with a big model like this, you can just brush it all on, but you also can just squirt it on and dab it around, which it seems a little barbaric, but you want to get it all over it all anyway, so why not? I'm going to use some clean water here. And I want this all to dry standing up. Oh, that's pretty dark actually. I want this to dry standing up, but I'm doing it flat, so everything kind of streaks downward. But I'm going to paint it this way so the camera can see it for now. I think I used a light gray last last time. This is going to be pretty dark. I'm going to thin this out a bit. I said I wanted it lighter, so I used the Vallejo, but I think I used the light gray Vallejo last time. This is going to be very dark. In fact, I'm going to pull some of it off here. And I squirted so much of it out. I've used this fort in the Buccaneers campaign, the organized play kit from 2020, I think. It is the Pacific adventure with English raiding different Spanish strongholds and little skirmishes. Quite fun. The last scenario, it needs a fort. It says a size 3 fort, but Firelock doesn't make a size 3 fort right now. And the image on the little setup shows this fort. So we use this fort playing through that campaign, and it made that last scenario very difficult, which it should be. It was in real life. But I was this English trying to take down this fort, and I failed terribly. Alright, so this is, I am a bit horrified at how dark this is. I just forgot which wash I used previously. So don't use the Vallejo Dark Grey. If you're going to use the Vallejo, use the light gray, or just use a Nuln Oil thinned down a bit so it's not too dark. But this is more than I meant to do. We'll see how it dries. But trying to thin it out with some water here. The other advantage the fort gives the defender is the height if you're shooting from the top, which makes it even more brutal marching up with no cover. And when you're shooting from elevation in Blood and Plunder, you apply a +1 penalty to the defender's save. So usually when you're out in the middle of nowhere, no cover, you're saving on a 9-10. But if you're being shot at from above, then you're saving on a only 10, so it's pretty much lost cause trying to save while being shot at from up here. It's a pretty big area. You got 8 gun ports. You can mount up to 4 cannons, I believe. And let's see. You can print out the stats for it. Yeah, it doesn't say how many cannons, so maybe you can mount, at least on that piece of paper. You might be able to mount a full 8, that'd be kind of crazy. Probably wouldn't want to, though. But you can mount, it's got the reinforced platform trait as well, so you can mount heavy cannons on it, and that's always fun. Those heavy cannon models are beautiful. Huge. And they roll a lot of dice. No extra reloads. They don't cost too much putting them on a fort. I recommend trying that out. A lot of fun. Alright, we got the inside walls here. That's pretty dark, but I think it's okay. The cracks on this are super deep. It eats up a lot of wash, and it's easy to miss spots. So look at it from a couple different angles. Like I missed the tops of these bricks here. nice texturing, but the priming also was quite difficult to try to get paint in all those little cracks. I had to go back with a brush and stab paint down into some of the cracks after washing it and letting it dry a long time because all the water got in those cracks. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put some of the brown wash in just for some color variation. The black's pretty strong, though. It's going to overpower most things. But if you mix some brown in some areas, you get some variation, which makes it look more interesting than just a big... This is almost done, so I'm just going to dip straight in with my unclean brush. And lastly, let's see if we can put a bit of green in there. This is the Athonian Camoshade. I'm not going to go crazy with this, but maybe a little bit near the ground. Maybe underneath here where it would stay more wet. Maybe, or maybe it'd stay more dry. That's going to settle and dry how it wants, but having some variation in your tones makes it look a little more convincing. That's going to take a while to dry because there's so much wash on there. But it's come a long ways from that. It's dry brushed to washed, which when it's dry looks more like that. Though I noticed I missed a little bit there. So this is fine. This looks great. And you can see these stones we picked out at the beginning are much less noticeable, not offensive at all. Barely notice them, but there is some variation, which is nice. So if it looks like a clown castle to start with, don't worry. And then we can do some warm weathering after this if we want. I varied my washes as I did this, but we can change it up even more if we wanted. And I'm going to use another product I like from Games Workshop, and that's the Typhus Corrosion. Which I think is designed for metal, really, but it has some grit to it. Looks nice and dirty. I use it sometimes on the edge of my decks and my ships for some nice grunge. There's lots of tons of weathering stuff out there, especially from the model hobby world. World War II weathering stuff. It's unlimited product, basically. Stuff's pretty thick, so I like to thin it down, but a couple streaks, maybe some muddy splashes near the base where it would be connected with the dirt. Make some little drippy lines where water would kind of flow from ledges or something. Or from an overhang like that. I should be using a smaller brush at this point, but just make a spot muddier, dirty. I'll a little bit more brown wash near the base. That's black. That's Nuln Oil again. Yeah, that Nuln Oil is closer to what I wanted. I prepped this all about 3 or 4 days ago, and then I haven't had a free evening since. I've forgotten which paint I used. I apologize. Hit any spots that I missed. The stone is too blue. Yep, that one side is going to be darker gray. That's my fault. Maybe I'll brighten it up with a bit of a dry brush. See if I can match it a little better. So that's it. It doesn't take that much time. Prime, pick out some bricks, dry brush with some lighter colors, then wash, and then additional weathering if you want. I'm going to let this wet side dry vertically. Got some wash in there. Then for the wooden decking up here, I like to use old wood for my base and then use some of those off-white or light tan for dry brush. Pick out the metal. But I'm going to wait to do that wood until I spilled some wash and stuff here, so I'll wait for that. But there's again one side with just the stones picked out with the dry brush, and then with a super heavy wash, and then with the wash plus some extra weathering. And just for comparison, I'll bring over my one I painted with before. It's a bit simpler. It's fine. This is gray with 2 colors of gray dry brush over the top of it, and then some weathering. You can see I got some brown introduced there. I think I used that Typhus Corrosion there as well, the top. I find this looks more interesting and convincing. This is more of a medieval style than a colonial style. Probably 16th century for sure, not 17th or 18th. So early Spanish architecture. So it would be weathered. It would be 100, 200 years old by the time we're working in Blood and Plunder, mid to late 17th to early 18th century. So being weathered is right. It should be looking pretty old. Yeah, go buy 4. They're pretty cool. Easy to paint, fun project, impressive on the board, very strong in gameplay. You'll win games if you play this, pretty sure. Only some factions can take it legally, so watch out for that. Militia factions, expeditionary forces, whatnot. Let me know if you have any other good stone painting ideas. Happy to hear from anybody. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.